If we're going to explore uh, duality and non-duality, let's begin with brass tacks. According to the great Tibetan saint Dzogchen Rinpoche, the fundamental duality of Buddhism would be striving to shove some things away, while striving, on the other hand, to pull some things towards us. Pushing and pulling, dreading and desiring. That's the fundamental duality. According to the Buddha, the problem is not that we experience these things or that we notice these things, but that these things, the problem arises when these things, these impulses, control us. When they control our choices and our utterances and our deeds, pretty much serves as the antidote for peace and fulfillment. We have a survival mechanism that has served us well for hundreds of thousands of years, of putting a sharp point on something, on not just recognizing as for instance, not just recognizing whether an object is small and brown, but distinguishing, chocolate from dog droppings. Because if you can't distinguish those things, you don't get to make me dessert. I know, I'm funny. Call me provincial. So this has served us well in many, many scenarios, but not necessarily in a contemplative scenario. So, for instance, this is not just explored by Buddhism, it is also explored in the 81 poems of the Tao Te Ching. So, for instance, we don't just notice appearances. We notice whether an appearance is beautiful or ugly. We notice whether a sound is melodious or discordant. We notice whether a sensation is pleasurable or painful. We notice whether a taste is delicious or disgusting. We notice whether a scent is, whether a cigarette is, whether a scent is fragrant or stinking. And internally, we do the same thing. We make a distinction between pleasurable and painful emotions, malicious and benevolent intentions, intelligent or stupid thoughts, painful or pleasurable memories, comforting or distressing imaginings. So we do this all the time. A typical path, and here's a great irony. Often people try to use belief as a shortcut. Belief as what they think will take it, let me rephrase this. Sometimes they use belief as an end run around what they think will be a lot of work and a lot of time. And they call this shortcut belief. Well, what is belief? Belief is a contrivance of emotion and intellect that relies on rigidity and our own innate controlling tendencies of our own inner experience. Well, what could possibly go wrong with that? Well, it is exhausting as it sounds. It requires a lot of energy. Once again, what's wrong with that? Well, we don't always have energy. Sometimes circumstantially, sometimes physically, sometimes interpersonally, sometimes mentally, we just don't have time and energy for, and many of these times, these circumstances are out of our control. But often when we have enough things going on, when you have enough plates in the air, our beliefs can crumble. Remember back in the 90s, if we had too many tabs open on our browser, and if we had too many programs running on our computer, the funny thing would just freeze and we'd have to unplug it. Well, that's probably why Vince Lombardi said that fatigue makes cowards of us all. This guy, as most people know, was a coach for the Green Bay Packers. His paycheck, his job security, was dependent upon how often his players won. Now his players, bless their hearts, they were good athletes, had good eye-hand coordination, had a good work ethic, they trained really hard. Um, but there weren't Nobel laureates. These were not Mensa candidates. So we had to had to dumb it down for them. Now, most people in this country are at least exposed to some variation of Christianity. And contemporary Christianity was influenced dramatically by the Emperor Constantine. And he felt the best way to manipulate the masses was through belief. Because belief can make us hyper suggestible. You see, Emperor Constantine didn't care about Jesus, didn't really care about people's well-being. He cared about being an emperor and staying in power for just as long as he could, and to do likewise for his offspring. And so, because of the influence of the Roman Empire and the Crusades and the way Western civilization works, the whole world is familiar with the idea of using belief as a sort of panacea, of trying to use the prefrontal cortex as a way to argue with the midbrain. Now, a lot of people think that's a good idea, especially insurance companies. Stay with me over here. This will not come as a great surprise to you. This will not make you faint. This will not make you clutch your pearls. This will not make you reach for your smelling salts. But insurance companies, despite what they say, don't care about the people who pay their premiums. They want to just make as big a profit as possible. They want to turn down treatments as possible. Even though they are not doctors, they want to make medical and psychiatric decisions as much as possible and always choose the cheaper option. Way back in the late 80s and the early 90s, the good folks at the insurance companies came up with the idea of short-term therapy because they felt that it wasn't as profitable for them to pay out for long-term therapy. Notice what their primary driver was: profit. So they invented variations of the rational emotive approach. They called it CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy. So this did not come from great thinkers. This did not come from PhDs who put it in placebo-controlled, double-blind studies and submitted it to peer review. No, this is not the product of science. This is the product of greed. Well, what could be wrong with long-term cognitive behavioral therapy? Plenty. Many times. People come to therapy with generalized anxiety disorder, and if they work really hard, after 6 months or a year, they still have the generalized anxiety disorder, but now on top of that, they also have depression. Why is that? Because when people use the prefrontal cortex for something it has not evolved to do, we're going to exhaust the prefrontal cortex. Now, doesn't that remind you of an old saying? When I once spoke to a gal from Arkansas, oh my gosh, way back in the 80s, and she told me something I'd never heard before, and I thought it was just hysterical. She said, "Don't try to teach the pig to sing. It'll waste your time and annoy the pig." Similarly, when we try to use our prefrontal cortex, which is great at solving math problems, we ask our prefrontal cortex to go argue with our midbrain about what we're feeling emotionally and why it's illogical. So, and a concept, by the way, our midbrain evolved prior to our prefrontal cortex, and to a large degree, it is therefore deaf to the prefrontal cortex. So, yeah, we're wasting the poor prefrontal cortex is wasting its time in annoying the midbrain, which would be adorable and cute and funny if not for the fact that the symptoms of an exhausted prefrontal cortex sure do look a lot like the symptoms of depression. Sometimes depression can be caused by gut dysbiosis. Sometimes depression can be caused by systemic inflammation. Sometimes the symptoms of depression can manifest or present simply due to exhaustion. So self-talk might sell books, but it doesn't work. And you know, there are wherever there are humans, you're going to find a lot of people who walk the path of Devadatta, the Buddha's wicked cousin, and a small and minority of people who walk the path of the Buddha. The path of Devadatta is to be rigid, fearful, controlling, elitist, competitive, cryptic, and cruel. The path of the Buddha is to be flexible, loving, laid back, lucid, egalitarian, cooperative, and kind. So those people, like the Buddha's cousin, are more clever than they are wise. And in their rigidity, in their controlling tendencies, they really are about contemplation, which is just another form of self-talk. I know this because my first teachers on the tantric path were in that tradition. So I spent my first 3-year retreat, my first 2 3-year retreats, up to my eyeballs in contemplations, thinking, oh man, I'm really going to become a Buddha quickly. No, it did not help me. It was exhausting, but it did not help me. It could exhaust an emotion, but it couldn't heal a trauma. It could exhaust rage, but it couldn't increase love. So wherever there are humans, there is going to be a demographic who are just controlled by a desire for wealth and power and prestige. They are rigid and controlling, and they will tell you how powerful self-talk is, but they are mistaken. Fortunately, there are 2 methods we can use. They both center around the practice of mindfulness and meditation. Now, there's lots of bullshitters who will say, dude, I'm so spiritual, I don't need to sit down to meditate. I just go through my life meditating while I'm doing everything else. No, you're not. No, you're not. Yes, you can meditate standing or sitting or lying down or walking, but you're meditating. It's a different process than brushing your teeth, defecating, or walking to work, and working a full day. So there are 2 strategies we can employ, both centered around meditation. And for sake of convenience, we're going to use the example of sitting meditation. The first one is word choice. Now, anything good can be abused. Sorry, that's just how it works. It can be, in the Buddha's most concise meditation manual, known in Pali as the Anapanasati Sutta, the Buddha described using self-talk during meditation, not to convince ourselves that things are different than the way they seem, just to put a label on our present moment experience. Now, when I first heard that, I was shocked. I'm like, is this just a sneaky form of contemplation? No, it isn't. See, our second method is using the autonomic solution, and they both revolve around each other. The autonomic solution, and I'll go into greater detail in like 3 or 4 minutes. The autonomic solution is this. Every time we breathe in, whether we know it or not, we access our sympathetic nervous system, which is wired to notice, not to actively concentrate, but to notice simply vulnerably, passively, viscerally, and randomly. It evolved before we could compose sonnets and have spoken language. It's over 100, it's millions of years old. It's as old as complex life forms on this planet. So it's not, in fact, in our head, it's in our spinal cord. Specifically, the systemic, the sympathetic nervous system is in the part of our spinal cord known as the thoracic region. And every time we exhale, we access the parasympathetic nervous system located in both the lumbar region as well as the cervical region of same spinal cord. So every time we breathe in, we're wired to notice. Every time we breathe out, we're wired for physical relaxation and mental release. This is the key to meditation, not contemplation, but meditation. Now, like you, I was told that if you're truly spiritual, you won't think anything ever. Your mind will be a void. But the Buddha never said that. Lao Tzu didn't say that. The Buddha did say to practice mindfulness, to notice what's going on. And an easy way to do that is to label things. But remember, we said a few moments ago not to put too sharp a point on things. So this is how it works. See, that's the wrong button. Sorry, guys. So this is how it works. Super simple. Instead of saying, oh, that's pretty or that's ugly, as we sit in meditation, we use the label appearance. And you can guess how it goes for the remaining four senses. Instead of labeling something as melodious or discordant, it's a resonance, it's a sound. Instead of labeling a sensation as pleasure or pain, we label it as sensation. Instead of labeling a flavor as delicious or disgusting, we label it simply as flavor. Instead of labeling a scent as fragrant or stinking, we just call it scent. Now, this isn't lying to us. We're not lying to ourselves. We're not using affirmations. Affirmations just a lie you tell yourself about your present, past, or future in hopes of changing things, in hopes of exerting our controlling tendencies. This isn't that. We're just labeling what we're experiencing in the present moment, and we're doing it as gently as possible because it's much easier to use a generic label than a highly precise label. And you can master this skill in like a week. It's totally easy. This also applies to our internal experience. So instead of saying, I'm happy or sad, we're saying, I'm experiencing an emotion. Instead of saying, I'm feeling malicious or benevolent, we're saying, I'm feeling an intention. Instead of saying, I'm feeling stupid or clever, we're saying, I'm thinking thoughts. Instead of saying, I'm having sad memories or happy memories, we're simply saying, I'm having memories. And the same thing with our flights of fancy. This really helps. And when we blend that with noticing and releasing, perhaps silently and mentally reciting a label as we breathe in and silently and mentally reminding ourselves to relax as we breathe out, but something weird happens. Instead of exhausting ourselves trying to ignore things or repress things, what happens is all that comes up, whether it's pleasurable or painful, whether it's interesting or boring, whether it's external or internal, whether it's physical or mental, whether it's glorious or grotesque, serves as like, I don't know, a battery pack in a Tesla. It actually, it is almost as if it functions to turn the metaphoric wheels and shafts of our meditation machine. Now, I'm a lazy, disabled hedonist, probably like you. And I've noticed this stuff works. I don't say this as an ideologue. I say this as a dumb son of a bitch who just wants to be happier, just like you. So this stuff works, not because I believe in it, not because some book written by a dead guy in a different continent, in a different language, in a different millennia told me so. Because when I used the truncated scientific method of experimenting and taking action and noticing my results and then seeing if those results could be replicated, it worked. It worked for me. It works for others. It's not your job to blindly believe. In about 2 minutes, a minute and a half, maybe 3 minutes, we're going to meditate together. And you can see for yourself, you can test it in the laboratory of your own body and mind. So let's take about 40 seconds for housekeeping, and then we'll hit it. We're going to hit it hard. This is Lama Jigme Gyatso of the Buddha Joy Meditation School. For more than 30 years, I have worked full time at studying and practicing and reverse engineering the teachings and techniques of each sect of Buddhism so you won't have to. I play the Yoda to your Luke Skywalker so that you can easily and quickly become the person that your dog already thinks you are. Welcome to Meditate Like a Jedi, which is made possible due to the generosity of viewers just like you. And now, together, quick like a bunny, let's turn to this morning's primary practice text. We don't need prayers to real or imagine entities. However, just as a sprinter has a visceral reaction to the sound of a starter's pistol or the sight of a finish line, most of the people who come to class want some structure. So I begin and end every meditation with a short recitation of love. Once again, this is not a prayer, just a way of exercising the neural pathways responsible for empathy. Big kids would call this bodhicitta and refuge. So we're going to play with 2 recitations. The first is more literal, and it's set to the triplet chant. Together. May I liberate all beings from the tyranny of hating, craving, and clinging by relying on thee. Buddha's example, instructions, and students. Those 3 words that are highlighted are so useful. They've earned the metaphoric nickname of the 3 wish-fulfilling jewels, which are inferred in the final premeditation recitation, which is more concise and more figurative and set to the bookend chant. Together. May I liberate all beings by relying on the 3 jewels. May I liberate all beings by relying on the 3 jewels. May I liberate all beings by relying on the 3 jewels. Hot water. Let's briefly review the basic meditation instructions. Whether you call it mindfulness and meditation, or Zen, Proto-Zen, Chan, Dhyana, Mahamudra, Mahasandhi, Ati Yoga, Dzogchen, and Trek Show. Meditation is super easy. Let's start with mindfulness. And just as I mentioned during class, every time we inhale, whether we know it or not, we access the sympathetic nervous system ensconced within the thoracic region of our spinal cord. It evolved not to support active concentration, but instead to support perception that is practiced vulnerably, passively, viscerally, and randomly. As inferred by inhalation's 12-syllable exercise, or recitation, perceiving this very turbulent, play of mind. Now, ill-informed fools will insist that it's bad for us to have a monkey mind. But the greatest luminaries have disagreed. What are some of the antics of mind? Well, mind has evolved to see, hear, feel, taste, smell, and the like. Internally, mind has evolved to emote, intend, reason, recall, and imagine. What are we to do with these things? Well, we're to meditate upon them. And how do we do that? Simple. Every time we exhale, whether we know it or not, we access the parasympathetic nervous system, ensconced within our lumbar spinal cord, as well as the cervical spinal cord. It evolved to help us to physically relax and mentally release, as is explored in exhalations recitation, relaxing into mind's non-graspable nature. Now, I've got some good news. It's not our job to be literal-minded. It's not our job to superstitiously believe literal-mindedness. It's not our job to pseudo-intellectually prove a literal view of such things. Way back in 4th grade, it was explained to me that not all statements are literal. Many are figurative, including statements that are hyperbolic, that use simile, and that use metaphor. When seen through the lens of figurative language, the more puzzling teachings of the Buddha are less mysterious. Think of it this way. Every time we relax into our exhalation, whatever we noticed during our previous inhalation could now feel as if it was as non-graspable as a vast empty void. It could feel as if it was as non-graspable as the illusion of the infinite azure sky on a bright and beautiful cloudless morn. For we might stand on our tippy toes and reach towards the sky with splayed fingers. We might grasp really intently and enthusiastically and pull those fingers, those fists to us. But when we open our hands, we're never greeted with blue sky. Therefore, by definition, it is non-graspable. There are other metaphors of non-graspability. Emptiness, birthlessness, deathlessness, selflessness. When we look at them as metaphors, the teachings seem less daunting. Remember, in the final passage, or the second to final passage of the Satipatthana Sutta, the Buddha taught that it doesn't take 3 kalpas to become a Buddha. You can do it, according to the Buddha, in 7 years, or 7 quarters, or 7 months, or 7 fortnights, or 7 weeks, or even 7 days. The Buddha said the path can be energetic and joyful. If someone says the only way to become a Buddha is that it takes 3 kalpas, or the lifespans of 3 universes, and that it's arduous and difficult, thank them for their time and run away, because they ain't got no clue. So, together as a team, I think it could be great fun if right now we meditated as profoundly as Ahsoka Tano on Lothal. We're going to begin with the 12-syllable technique, which is pretty much like when we were a kid and our dad put training wheels on our bicycle. We can take off the first of two metaphoric training wheels by switching from the 12-syllable exercise to a 3-syllable exercise. Silently and mentally reciting notice this during each inhalation, and silently and mentally reciting relaxing during each exhalation. Now, just as I mentioned during the opening lesson, we can play with labels. If we feel, maybe if our scalp starts itching, we can play with physical sensation. And then as we exhale, we can return to relaxing. When we find ourselves thinking deep thoughts or about dinner, we can play with the label cognition, relaxing. Oh, excuse me. If we find ourselves remembering an event or a piece of media, recollect, relaxing. And now we can take off the second metaphoric training wheel and switch gears from the three-syllable technique down to the one-syllable technique. We've made some subtle adjustments. Instead of using sensation, instead of referring to physical sensations, we use the noun form. Instead of referring to recollection, we use the preposition then, and instead of using the word imagination, we use the verb dream. The default mode is simply, as we inhale, to silently and mentally recite the demonstrative pronoun this, and as we exhale, to silently and mentally recite the one-syllable synonym of relaxing, the verb ease. I think it could be great fun if together as a team we chanted a verse from Yong-jia Xuan-jue's Song of Enlightenment. Together. Do not search for the truth and do not dismiss delusion. Realize both are empty and have no form. No form, but neither empty nor not empty. That is the Tathagata's real form. Although the Buddha taught that mindfulness was the first of 7 enlightenment factors, there are some who'd rather let go than notice in the first place, even though both mindfulness and meditation are included within the Eightfold Path. In an effort to remedy this, the South Indian Buddhist scholar Nagarjuna taught of the two truths: the conventional, that we notice during our inhalation, and the ultimate, that we experience by letting go during our exhalation. Perhaps that is why the Dalai Lama's late tutor, Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, taught that just as a bird requires both its wings to take to the sky, likewise, we require both awareness and release to tread the Buddha's path. When you notice a light show behind your closed eyelids, you can silently and mentally play with the labels see, ease. The presence or absence of a light show is neither an exoneration, an acquittal, nor an indictment. It just is. Nothing obstructs the mirror of the mind, illuminating a universe of countless realms, where millions of images appear, neither inside nor outside the perfect light. Enlightenment is our neurological birthright. The ultimate truth of all things is as close as our next relaxing exhalation, provided we do not cling rigidly to either the noticing nor releasing of mindfulness and meditation. Seeing everything is unto, they dismiss the laws of karma. Such recklessness is sure to bring misfortune. Renouncing existence for emptiness is the same as jumping into a fire to escape a flood. Actions driven by either a dread of punishment or a desire for reward are only an analog of ethics and a derangement of mindfulness. When intellectual grasping at the treatise of emptiness masquerades as wisdom, the pseudo-intellectuals strive to give license to the cruelty. However, a truly liberating experience of both awareness and release frees us from the pettiness of our amygdala, fearful and cruel, returning us to the homeostasis of our anterior cingulate gyrus's highest love, spontaneous and uncontrived. Flowing from centered spontaneity, our kindness is our ethics. May all minds of all beings now be as peaceful and wise as all Buddha's mind, symbolized by a one-syllable mantra known as a Sitile or Bija mantra. May all relationships of all beings now be as joyful and loving as a Buddha's communication symbolized by the six syllable mantra. May all bodies of all beings now enjoy the beautiful health depicted in Buddhist thought of the blissful body of a yidam of lore and archetype of enlightenment. May all circumstances or lots of all beings now have their great safety, good fortune, or boon. As a Buddha's real or imagined paradise, pure land of Ati. As we relax into our exhalation, whatever we notice during our previous inhalation could feel as non-graspable as a vast empty void. Like the illusion of the infinite azure sky on a beautiful cloudless morn, which, although compelling to the eye, is not graspable to the hand. How is it that as we inhale, all circumstances could appear quite vivid? Yet as we relax into our exhalation, they could feel as non-graspable as a real or imagined body of light. How is it that as we inhale, our bodies could feel quite sensual? Yet as we relax into our exhalation, they could feel as non-graspable as a real or imagined yadam of light. How is it that as we inhale, communications experience of the interpersonal could be quite resounding? Yet as we relax into our exhalation, it could feel as non-graspable as a mantra of light. Let us seal this morning's meditation with a bit of the old chanting, beginning with kind ethics and concluding with the four immeasurables. May all beings practice of kind communication, conduct, and calmness flow spontaneous and uncontrived. May everyone be free from misery, may everyone be happy. May no one be separated from the happiness. May everyone have balance from the tyranny of hating, craving, and clinging freed. If you feel that I have earned it, you could give this live stream a thumbs up. You could even help support this channel. In approximately 10.5 hours, I would very much like to return to lead tonight's evening meditation class and group practice. And if you are as geeky as me, this is the way.